My name is Alara Vance and my life is a carefully constructed lie. The man I call Father Alistair Vance is not my biological parent. Decades ago, locked in a bitter war over the Vance family fortune, he found himself facing an impossible clause in my grandfather's will. Only a male heir could secure the inheritance. Desperate, Alistair purchased a baby boy from a shadowy network and presented him as his own. That boy was Julian. As for me, his true-born daughter, I was shipped away, a secret to be hidden. For 5 years, I lived in obscurity, until the day Alistair decided it was safe to bring me back under the guise of taking in the orphan child of an old friend. I was returned to the gilded cage of the Vance estate, not as a daughter but as a project. From that day forward my life was not my own. I was molded, polished and educated in every art, language and business strategy imaginable. I learned to play the piano, to discuss macroeconomic theory, and to host a dinner party for 50 without a single misstep. All of it had a single ultimate purpose: to become the perfect wife for Julian Vance, the heir to the Vance empire. I was the final, masterful stroke in Alistair's plan to secure his legacy. I never questioned it. How could I? This life, however gilded, was all I had ever known. The faint, nagging feeling of being an imposter in my own skin was a secret I kept even from myself. I learned to obey, to perform, to become the reflection of what Alistair demanded. Julian, however, never saw me as anything more than a living, breathing symbol of his own gilded cage. He resented the life that had been chosen for him, and he reserved the deepest part of that resentment for me. His heart belonged to another, a woman named Isabella Rossi. She was his childhood savior, the light in his eyes, the one who had nursed him back to health when he ran away from home as a boy and found himself starving on the doorstep of her family's modest home in a coastal town. He loved her with a fervor he never showed me. He married me out of duty, and the child in my womb was nothing more than a contractual obligation, a box to be checked on Alistair's list of demands. Julian's love, his promises, his future, all were whispered to Isabella, who he had installed as his personal secretary the moment he joined Vance Corporation. I knew she existed. I saw the way he looked at her during company functions, a world of unspoken words passing between them. She played the part of the understanding, suffering lover perfectly. "As long as I can be by your side," she would tell him, "I don't care about a title." And he, drowning in guilt, promised her that once I had given him the required heir, he would send me away with a generous settlement and make her his wife. This was the carefully balanced, miserable equilibrium of my life. Until the night it all shattered. It was the night of the annual Vance Corporation Gala. I was 7 months pregnant, my body heavy with a child its father saw as a burden. The air in the grand ballroom was thick with perfume and the clinking of champagne flutes, a symphony of false pleasantries. I stood near a balcony, a glass of sparkling juice in my hand, trying to find a moment of quiet. That's when she found me. Isabella Rossi, radiant in a gown of pristine white silk, a stark contrast to the deep emerald I wore. "Alara," she said, her voice a saccharine melody. "You tired? The pregnancy must be so draining." I offered a tight smile. "I'm managing, thank you, Isabella." She moved closer, deliberately bumping into my arm. The deep red juice in my glass sloshed over the rim, cascading down the front of her beautiful white gown in a grotesque spreading stain. A gasp, perfectly timed, escaped her lips. She looked toward the entrance of the ballroom, where Julian had just appeared with his mother, Eleanor. Then she turned back to me, her eyes glinting with malicious triumph. "Oh, Ilara," she sighed, her voice dripping with false pity. "Look what you've done. Julian will be so disappointed. Think carefully about how you'll explain this to him." In my first life, this was the moment my world began to unravel. I had stammered, panicked, tried to explain it was an accident. Isabella had then pretended I had shoved her, showing a faint scratch on her wrist just as Julian arrived. He had seen the stain on her gown, the injury on her arm, and my frantic face. He had dragged me away from his mother, his voice a low, venomous growl. "Who gave you the right to lay a hand on my woman? Apologize." But that was a different Alara. An Alara who died cold, wet, and betrayed on a rain-slicked highway. A strange calm settled over me. The memories of my death flooded back. The feel of the rain, the screech of tires, the voice of the driver on the phone. "Isabella, I've done the job. Are you still not at ease?" I'll wait until she stops breathing before calling the police. Isabella had orchestrated my murder. And Julian, by abandoning me on that dark road, was her accomplice. I looked at Isabella now, at her smug, victorious face, and I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile that didn't reach my eyes. I reached out, plucked the half-full glass of red wine from her hand, and in one smooth, deliberate motion, tipped it over her perfectly styled head. The dark liquid soaked her hair, streamed down her face, and bloomed across the ruined white silk, creating a far more dramatic and pitiful picture than a simple juice stain ever could. "Now," I said, my voice eerily calm. "This looks truly pitiful, doesn't it?" She stared at me wide-eyed and sputtering, red wine dripping from her nose. "Ilara, are you insane?" I hurled the empty glass aside, the shattering crystal drawing every eye in the vicinity. I seized her wrist, my grip like iron. "Today I'll show you what it really means to use power to bully others." "Let go," she shrieked, thrashing violently. "How dare you treat me like this? Julian will never forgive you." I heard the hurried footsteps behind me. "Julian, help me!" Isabella screamed. At that exact moment I released her wrist. She flung her arm back with all her might, the momentum causing her to stumble forward while I fell backward, my arms instinctively cradling my belly. "Isabella, what are you trying to do?" I cried out, my voice a piercing shriek of feigned terror and pain. The scream cut through the ballroom's murmur, and suddenly, everyone was staring at us. The scene was set. The roles were reversed. And the game had just begun. I landed on the plush carpet with a controlled fall, my primary concern the safety of the child within me. The baby kicked, a sharp, insistent reminder of what was truly at stake. As I lay there, the cold marble of the hallway floor seeping through my dress, I saw Julian and his mother, Eleanor, rushing towards us. Their faces were a study in contrasting horror. Julian's eyes went straight to Isabella, who was now sobbing hysterically, covered in wine, looking every bit the victim. His expression contorted with rage, and for a heart-stopping second, I saw the ghost of my past life, the man who would drag me across a room and force me to apologize. But Eleanor reached me first. Her face, usually a mask of serene composure, was pale with fear. "Ilara, my God, are you all right? The baby." She helped me to my feet, her hands trembling. I leaned into her, allowing a few genuine tears of relief and shock to well in my eyes. The fall had been minor, but the terror was real. "She pulled away so violently, Mother," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I was just trying to. I don't know what happened." Julian was at Isabella's side, his arm around her, dabbing at her dress with a napkin. "What did you do to her, Ilara?" he snarled, his voice low and dangerous. This was the critical moment. In my previous life I had been defensive, angry, which only cemented my image as the jealous, hormonal wife. This time I would weaponize their own narrative. I pressed deeper into Eleanor's embrace and let my tears fall. She admitted she's carrying Julian's child," I sobbed, the words catching in my throat. "She told me to step aside. She said that from now on, everything in the Vance family would belong to her." The effect was electric. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd that had gathered at a safe, gossipy distance. Eleanor's grip on my shoulders tightened. Julian's head snapped up from Isabella, his eyes wide with shock. "Is that true?" Eleanor's voice was like ice, directed not at me but at her son. Julian's gaze on me was pure, unadulterated hatred. But when he turned back to Isabella, his expression shifted to one of desperate hope. "Isabella? Is it true?" His voice trembled with an excitement he couldn't hide, a stark contrast to the weary resignation he had shown when I told him I was pregnant. Isabella, caught off guard, was torn. She hadn't planned to reveal this yet, not in such a public and chaotic manner. But the lure of claiming her place, of seeing the joy on Julian's face, was too strong. Even knowing it might be a trap, she couldn't resist. She blushed, a masterful performance of shyness, and nodded, burying her face in Julian's shoulder. "I only just found out. I haven't had the chance to tell you." Julian wrapped her tightly in his arms, a joyful smile spreading across his face. "That's wonderful. Finally, we're going to have a child." The words were a dagger to the carefully constructed fiction of our marriage. He said "we." He never said "we" about me. He lifted his gaze to me, and over Isabella's head, his eyes met mine. They were filled with a mocking triumph. The commotion had drawn the attention of the one person whose opinion mattered most, Alistair Vance. My father emerged from the crowd, his presence commanding immediate silence. He took in the scene, Isabella disheveled and weeping in Julian's arms and me pale and trembling in Eleanor's. He said nothing, his face an unreadable mask. But he gestured for us to follow him to a private lounge. Once the door was closed, the mask shattered. He turned to Julian, and with a speed that belied his age, his hand connected with Julian's cheek in a slap that echoed through the soundproofed room. Julian staggered back, clutching his face in fury. "From childhood until now, I've followed every order you gave me," he shouted, his voice raw. "Even marrying someone I don't love, I did it for you. Now that Alara is pregnant, why can't I be with the woman I truly love?" Isabella fell to her knees, sobbing. "Chairman Vance, it's all my fault. Please don't blame Julian. But loving someone isn't wrong. All I want now is to give birth to this baby safely." Alistair looked down at her, his eyes, which had seen decades of corporate warfare, seeing straight through her performance. She thought Julian's love and the child in her womb were her tickets to power. She didn't understand that I was the key. I was the one who carried the Vance bloodline, the true heir to the fortune he had fought so hard to secure. He pulled out his checkbook, scribbled on it, and tossed the slip of paper at her feet. "Here's 3 million, his voice was icy, leaving no room for argument. "Tomorrow I'll have someone arrange for your abortion. Stay here and rest tonight," Isabella wailed. Julian lost all composure, shouting furiously, demanding to know why. Alistair's voice cut through his tantrum, cold and final. "The wife of my heir, the mother of my grandchild, can only be Alara." In that moment I saw the first crack in Julian's armor. He was not the master of his fate, he was a pawn just like me. And I had just proven that I was the more valuable piece on the board. The next morning the household was in an uproar. Julian had defied his father, sneaking out in the middle of the night with Isabella. Over breakfast, Eleanor tried to comfort me. "As long as she still wants to be part of this family, sooner or later she'll come back." I let my eyes fill with tears. "Julian once told me he never liked me. He only married me and had a child with me because of you and father. Now that Isabella is pregnant, sooner or later the position of Mrs. Vance will be hers." Alistair slammed his chopsticks on the table, the sound making me jump. "Over my dead body." He looked at my large belly and his voice softened just a fraction. "If he won't obey me, then forget him. I still have my grandson. The most important thing now is that you focus on your pregnancy and give birth safely." I nodded, choking back sobs. "I'll listen, father." The deep crease between his brows loosened, and a flicker of satisfaction appeared on his face. I had successfully planted the seeds. Julian was the disobedient son. I was the dutiful daughter carrying the future. And Isabella was the opportunistic threat. The battle lines were drawn, and for the first time I was not standing on the wrong side of them. Julian returned home 3 days later, cowed by a series of threats from Alistair that I could only imagine. But his presence was a ghostly one. He moved through the house with a sullen resentment, and it wasn't long before he began vanishing for days at a time. My father fumed, threatening to cut off his inheritance, but it was an empty threat and Julian knew it. Alistair needed a male heir to present, and for now Julian was it. This stalemate was not part of my plan. I needed to accelerate the fracture, to make Alistair see that Julian was not just rebellious, but an active liability. To do that, I needed to expose the depth of his betrayal not just as a husband but as a son. I knew Julian's habits. He was careless, arrogant in his belief that his father would never truly cast him out. I hired a private investigator. The reports came back quickly, filled with damning details. Julian had bought Isabella a luxurious apartment in the city center. They were playing house. He accompanied her to every prenatal appointment, they shopped for baby clothes together, they attended parenting classes. In the eyes of their little world, they were the happy, expectant couple. I waited for the perfect moment. One morning, as both my parents were at the breakfast table, I laid a plain manila envelope beside my father's plate. "What's this?" he asked, his tone gruff. "I think you should see for yourself," I said, my voice soft. He opened it and the color drained from his face. The photos spilled out. Julian and Isabella laughing outside a mother and baby store, his hand resting protectively on her small baby bump. The the two of them entering their shared apartment building. It was a curated collection of their domestic bliss. I didn't say a word. I just let the tears roll down my cheeks silently, my hand resting on my own belly. Alistair was so furious he stood up so abruptly his chair scraped back. He immediately called his lawyer, snarling about changing his will. I didn't know if he followed through, but the shift had begun. The seed of doubt I had planted was now a sprouting weed, choking out whatever residual hope he had for his adopted son. To further the charade of my heartbreak, my mother, Eleanor, suggested we go shopping. "It will do you good to get out, darling," she said, her eyes full of sympathy. I agreed, but this was no casual outing. I had orchestrated every detail. We went to a high-end boutique where I was a known, if infrequent, client. As we approached the entrance, a sales clerk I had privately compensated greeted me with a brilliant, rehearsed smile. "Hello, Mrs. Vance. The handbag you ordered has arrived. I was just about to call you." Eleanor looked at me curious. "What bag did you order?" "Show me," she said, pulling me inside. I shook my head, feigning confusion. "I haven't ordered any bag recently. They must have mistaken me for someone else." Eleanor's face darkened. The gentle mother vanished, replaced by the steel magnolia who had defended her place in the Vance family for decades. "I want to see who dares to impersonate you and claim to be Mrs. Vance," she said, her voice cold. The truth was, the bag had been ordered by Julian months ago during a rare civil outing. He had used my money to pay the deposit while I was in a changing room. I'd never known. A few days prior, a friend had spotted the bag and mentioned it, and only then did I piece it together. A search through my possessions revealed this was a pattern. Julian was a professional at using my resources to fund his double life. I had made a deal with the clerk. Call Julian, tell him the bag was ready, and arrange a pickup time. My bet was that Isabella, who according to the staff always collected new stock the day it arrived, wouldn't be able to resist. And just as I predicted, she arrived right on time. The clerk greeted her with the same bright smile. "Mrs. Vance, the handbag you ordered is here." Isabella nodded in satisfaction and handed over the receipt. "I'm here to pick it up." I had my back to her, trying on that very handbag. She froze when she saw it on my shoulder but quickly regained her composure. The clerk discreetly slipped the receipt into my hand. "Mrs. Vance, she's here." I gave a faint hum, glanced down at the receipt with my name and ID clearly printed, and said, "Wrap it up." The clerk began packing the bag. Isabella was completely ignored. She stood there, waiting, her confusion turning to fury as she watched her prize being handed to me. When the gift box was placed in my hands, she snapped. She charged forward, trying to snatch it. "That bag is mine. Why are you giving it to her?" I turned around and shoved the receipt in her face. "Is your name Alara Vance? Or are you trying to impersonate me, Miss Rossi?" She faltered, but seeing I was alone, her arrogance returned. "There's no rule that says the one who picks it up has to be the one who ordered it. Julian gave me that receipt. The bag is obviously mine." I let out a cold laugh, deliberately raising my voice. "You're just my husband's secretary. Why are you speaking so intimately as if you were his wife, Miss Rossi? You're only here to pick something up on his behalf, yet you dare to overstep and act like the official Mrs. Vance." My words struck her like a physical blow. She wanted the title more than anything, but she couldn't admit to being the mistress, not here, not now. Her face flushed, then paled. I took the bag and turned to leave. Unwilling to be defeated, she rushed after me and grabbed at it. "I won't let you take this." We struggled. I held tightly to the handle and she pulled hard. The boutique descended into chaos. My pregnancy was obvious, and the staff, unaware Isabella was also pregnant, rushed to my defense, carefully shielding me. On cue, Eleanor emerged from a fitting room. She took in the scene in an instant. Isabella shoving her pregnant daughter-in-law. Her fury exploded. She stormed over and slapped Isabella twice hard, the sound cracking through the air. "Who gave you the guts to lay a hand on Alara?" she seethed. "I've seen plenty of mistresses, but never one this shameless." The first slap left Isabella dizzy. The second sent her crashing to the floor. 2 bright red handprints bloomed on her cheeks. Security arrived, the boutique had to close, and a crowd gathered, phones raised, recording everything. Isabella sobbed and tried to call Julian, but he didn't answer. He was in a business dinner I had arranged, completely unaware. My mother didn't rush to leave. Instead, she sat on the sofa, pointed at several bags and outfits, and said, Pack them all. Then as I paid, she gestured to me and announced to the staff, "Everyone take a good look. This is the real Mrs. Vance." The staff bowed in unison. "Good evening, Mrs. Vance." On the way home, Eleanor opened her banking app and transferred me an amount even greater than what I had just spent. "Buy whatever you want. If it's not enough, tell me." Within the hour, the story had spread across the city. The Vance family's dirty laundry was now public spectacle. And I, the betrayed wife, had the one thing I needed most. My mother-in-law, the formidable Eleanor Vance, standing firmly and publicly by my side. The fallout from the boutique incident was swift and brutal. That night, Julian stormed into my room, his face a mask of pure rage. He must have seen the videos online. "Elara, you shameless woman," he roared, raising his hand to strike me. But my father, alerted by the commotion, arrived just in time. He caught Julian's wrist, his grip like iron. "For another woman, you dare raise your hand against your wife?" Alistair thundered, shoving him back. He kicked Julian hard in the leg. "Kneel." Julian staggered, bracing himself against the wall. "I'm your real son," he shouted, his voice cracking with a mix of fury and desperation. "Why are you always siding with an outsider?" He shoved Alistair's hand away and stormed out of the house, the front door slamming shut with a finality that echoed through the marble halls. Alistair nearly stumbled and I rushed to catch his arm. "Father, please take care of yourself." He panted heavily, the rage radiating off him. "Very good," he muttered, his voice dangerously low. "This is the son I poured my heart into raising." The next morning, the consequences of Julian's tantrum became catastrophically clear. Alistair's assistant rushed into the estate, his face ashen. "Chairman, we failed to meet Mr. Thorne at the airport and we can't reach Director Vance." The assistant was wringing his hands. This matter was supposed to be handled directly by him. "I don't have Mr. Thorne's personal contact information. We've sent emails but haven't received any reply." Mr. Thorne was the head of Ethelred Group, our biggest client. He held a contract worth hundreds of millions, a deal Julian had worked for months to secure. His personal inspection today was the final step before signing. In my previous life, this single deal had cemented Julian's power within the company. Now he had abandoned it in a fit of pique. Hearing the name Thorne, I paused. "Is Mr. Thorne's first name Lysander?" The assistant turned to me, surprised. "Yes, Mrs. Vance. I heard he's originally from London. When he was 6, his family immigrated to France." I unlocked my phone, found an old group photo from my university days, and handed it to the assistant. "Take a look. Is this him?" The assistant's eyes widened. "Yes, this is him. I've seen his photo in Director Vance's files." I smiled and nodded. I turned to my father, who was watching me with a strange, intense look. "Lysander Thorne was my classmate in college. His wife, Genevieve, and I are still in frequent contact." Right in front of my father and his stunned assistant, I dialed a number. I spoke in fluent French, a language neither of them understood. "Lysander? It's Elara Vance." "Yes, that Elara. I know it's been too long. I'm calling about a rather urgent matter. Seems there's been a communication breakdown." "Yes, I can explain everything. Where are you staying?" After a brief, cheerful conversation, I hung up and wrote down a phone number and a hotel address. I handed the note to my father. Mr. Thorne and his team changed hotels at the last minute. If the assistant goes there now, he'll still make it in time. My father gave a few terse instructions, and the assistant scurried away, hope restored. I then placed a cup of Alistair's favorite oolong tea in front of him. "I've already arranged an afternoon tea with Genevieve Thorne," I said calmly. "Don't worry, father. This order will definitely belong to Vance Corporation." His eyes, for the first time, glowed with something akin to genuine approval. "You're calmer than Julian ever was," he remarked. I smiled softly. "I've been part of the Vance family since I was 5. I've always treated you as my real father. I won't let down all the years you've spent raising me." The meeting with Lysander Thorne was a masterclass in subtle negotiation. He was lounging on a sofa in his suite, his gaze immediately dropping to my pregnant belly. "I almost forgot to congratulate you," he said, a sly smirk on his face. I returned a steady smile. "Should I be thanking you for that?" He laughed. "I was surprised when you called me. After the way we parted. You broke up with me one-sidedly, Elara. I never stopped liking you. He had pursued me fiercely during our studies abroad, a secret Julian never knew about. I had ended it when I returned home to fulfill my duty. I lifted my left hand, my wedding ring catching the light. But my answer has always been no. I never intended to stay for you. I was honest with him. I told him everything about my situation, about Julian, about Isabella, about my position in the Vance family. I didn't hide my ambition. You don't need to do anything else for me, I said finally. Lysander frowned. If I'm not mistaken, you're fighting for your place, aren't you? More accurately, I'm not qualified to fight yet, I replied. But if I have your support, I'll have a seat at the table. He nodded seriously. To be honest, I already had faith in Vance Corporation's products. But compared to him, I'd much rather work with you. He spread his arms as if to embrace me. I only extended my hand for a firm shake. Let's cooperate happily. When I returned home, Julian was waiting for me, his expression venomous. He had been informed by Thorne that the deal was under review. Elara, at worst I'll give up the Ethelred contract, but I will never let you win, he spat. You're manipulative, vicious. I truly regret marrying you. Be ready to receive the divorce papers. He shoved me onto the bed. My phone spilled out, its screen glowing. I had called my father before I entered the room, and the line was still open. No, Julian, you can't do this to me and our child. I cried out, struggling as he pinned me down. Through the phone we heard my father's furious roar. Julian's face went pale. He grabbed the phone and stammered, Father, don't let Elara fool you. She set me up. After hanging up, he hurled the phone at me. Just wait and see, he snarled before storming out. When my father returned, he found me sobbing in Eleanor's arms, trembling. He could only sigh heavily. Wiping away tears, I looked at him. Tomorrow the Ethelred team has their own schedule, but I've arranged a meeting with Genevieve. Lysander agreed to give us an hour. My father nodded, a new respect in his eyes. Elara, you've suffered too much. Then he asked gently, can you come with me tomorrow? The meeting was a resounding success. My father appointed me Director of Public Relations shortly after. 2 weeks later, under my lead, Ethelred Group and Vance Corporation officially signed a 5-year supply contract, 2 years longer than Julian's original draft. When I placed the contract on my father's desk, he tapped his fingers against it, his voice full of a satisfaction I had never heard before. Elara, this is even better than I expected. I smiled modestly. After all, Father, I'm your own student. Trained by you. For the first time, I was no longer just a vessel for an heir or a pawn in a game. I was a player. And I was just getting started. With the Ethelred contract secured, my position within Vance Corporation transformed from a formality into a tangible force. My father, Alistair, promoted me to vice president, placing me in charge of the new partnership and business expansion. For the first time, I made a demand of my own. I want to keep my position as Director of Public Relations, I stated calmly in his opulent office. If a public battle arises, the communication system must remain under my control. I will never betray Vance Corporation because my goal is the entire company. The look he gave me was not one of paternal affection, but of strategic recognition. I was no longer just his daughter. I was his protégé and perhaps his successor. When I returned to my room that evening, I found Julian there, a rare occurrence. He was lying on the bed but sat up the moment I entered. Elara, I heard the whole conversation, he began, his voice unnaturally soft. Congratulations. He reached out as if to hug me, a faint, wistful smile on his lips, a ghost of the charming man he could sometimes pretend to be. It was a hollow performance. I felt nothing but a cold contempt. My life had been a transaction from the start, and he was the flawed currency. Say it, I said, brushing his hand away and walking to the sofa. Why are you back this time? The mask dropped instantly. His face hardened. If it weren't for me, Thorne would have never come to inspect Vance Corporation. That alone is worth at least 20 million, isn't it? He was broke. Alistair controlled the purse strings with an iron fist, and the luxurious apartment he'd bought for Isabella, along with her extravagant tastes, had drained what little he had managed to squirrel away. My private investigator had recently delivered another juicy piece of information. Isabella's brother, a chronic gambler, had moved in with her, and his debts were piling up. This demand for money was undoubtedly connected. You really know how to put a price on things, don't you, Julian? I sneered. Even sleeping with me for one night, you dare demand 20 million? Fury flashed in his eyes. He shot up and gripped my cheeks, forcing me to look at him. Alara, don't overstep. Don't forget who gave you everything you have today. Without the title of Mrs. Vance, you're nothing. Just a woman no one would want. I gave a cold, scornful laugh. If I really owed my position today to you, then why are you here begging me for money? Even the bags and jewelry you buy for your mistress are paid for with my money. Do you have the face to say that? My parents are right downstairs. Why don't you go ask them if they'll give you any? He knew he'd get nothing but contempt from Alistair. I was his only option and his approach was pathetic. Let me guess what the money's for, I continued, my voice dripping with venom. Buying back Isabella's secretly snapped scandal photos? Or patching up your brother-in-law's gambling debts? His face shifted from green to pitch black. My soft laugh was sharper than a knife. So I guessed right, didn't I? He froze, then roared, slamming his fist down on the glass coffee table. The surface cracked into a spiderweb of jagged lines. His hand bled, a pathetic sight of trapped fury. Alara, don't you dare try to come between us, he screamed, eyes bloodshot. Isabella was right. She knew if I came back you'd put all the blame on her. He was trying to convince himself, but the seed of doubt I'd planted about her brother was already gnawing at him. I stood, opened a drawer and pulled out a thick stack of photos and documents. The full, unedited report from my investigator. I hurled them at him. They scattered across the floor like accusing ghosts. Photos of Isabella's brother entering casinos, loan sharks loitering outside her apartment, receipts for exorbitant purchases. Julian sat on the floor, clutching his head, pulling at his hair as if to rip the truth out. It's not true. It can't be true. Isabella would never lie to me. I was done. I turned toward the door. The moment my hand touched the knob, he lunged. He pinned me against the wall, his hands crushing my throat, his face a twisted nightmare of rage. Alara, you're too cruel. Don't blame me. This is your fault. My vision began to spot. But I was prepared. I had carried a mini stun baton in my pocket for weeks, anticipating his volatility. With the last of my strength, I drove it hard into his side. A guttural scream ripped from him. He released me, convulsing as he collapsed to the floor. Gasping for air, I staggered out, clutching the wall for support. I barely made it to the stairway before everything went black. I woke in a hospital bed. The first thing I felt was the familiar round curve of my belly. The baby was safe. Relief washed over me. Eleanor was by my side, her head resting on the bed, asleep. She stirred as I moved. Alara, are you feeling any pain? Her voice was thick with worry. I shook my head. Mom, I'm just thirsty. After she helped me drink, her expression grew heavy. There's something I need to prepare you for. I stayed calm. It's about Julian, isn't it? She nodded softly. When you fainted, everyone was focused on getting you here. No one noticed him. The butler said he woke up like a madman, stormed out, and no one could stop him. She covered her face, sobbing. It was raining, the road was slick. He was driving too fast. He crashed into a tree. He was killed instantly. I closed my eyes. The road. The rain. The irony was a bitter, chilling thing. The man who had left me to die on a wet highway had met his own end on one. The Vance estate was far from the city, the road home deserted, and Julian had always driven with a reckless arrogance. It was a tragedy, but not an unpredictable one. After his cremation, the final act of the farce played out. Isabella, her belly huge, stormed into the corporation demanding responsibility. I'm carrying a Vance heir. You must take care of me. I nodded to my secretary. Is Miss Rossi here? Arrange for a DNA test. She frowned. What's the point? He's dead. Why test anything? I explained evenly, my voice carrying through the open office. Even if the father is gone, we can still compare the child's bloodline to his grandparents. If it's a boy, the Y chromosome will match his grandfather. If it's a girl, the X chromosome can be compared to his grandmother. Isabella's face fell. She refused the test and left, her claims crumbling without evidence. A month later, a shocking piece of news buzzed through the city's social circles. A young woman named Rossi had been beaten into a coma by her own brother after she blocked the sale of their home, which their mother needed to finance her remarriage. The mother, with little income, publicly begged for help with her daughter's medical bills. The woman's identity was quickly exposed online. Isabella Rossi. The internet erupted. The news of Isabella Rossi's fate was a grim, distant epilogue to the tragedy that had unfolded in my home. There was no satisfaction in it, only a hollow sense of a chapter violently closed. The woman who had conspired to end my life was now lost to a darkness of her own family's making. The world moved on as it always does, to the next scandal. My focus narrowed to a single unwavering point: the child growing within me and the empire I was now poised to inherit. With Julian gone, I was no longer just the vessel for the heir, I was the heir apparent. Alistair's attention, once divided between a disappointing son and a useful daughter, was now entirely fixed on me. The months of my pregnancy became a period of intense preparation. Alistair began bringing corporate documents home, not for Julian but for me. We would sit in his study, the air thick with the scent of old leather and fine whiskey, and he would drill me on corporate strategy, financial reports, and the intricate, often brutal politics of the boardroom. It was the education he had always given Julian, but now delivered with a new, fierce intensity. I was no longer a supporting actress in the Vance dynasty. I was being groomed for the lead role. Eleanor, meanwhile, became my guardian angel. Her gentle exterior hid a core of tempered steel, and she used every ounce of her social influence to solidify my position. She orchestrated casual lunches with the wives of key board members, where my poise and intelligence were quietly displayed. She ensured that the narrative in our social circle was unequivocal. Ilara Vance was the savior of the Ethelred deal, the steadfast wife wronged, and the capable leader stepping into the void left by her reckless husband. The day I went into labor, the atmosphere at the Vance estate was one of heightened, almost frantic anticipation. It wasn't just about the birth of a child. It was about the birth of the next generation of leadership. When the doctor announced, "It's a boy," the look on Alistair's face was one of pure, unadulterated triumph. The dynasty was secure. He named him Alistair Julian Vance too, a name that honored the past while placing all its hopes on the future. My future. In the quiet, exhausted moments after the birth, as I held my son, a profound shift occurred within me. This small, helpless life was my responsibility, my blood. The gilded cage of the Vance name was now his inheritance too. But I would not let it be his prison. I would make it his fortress. My maternity leave was brief. 6 weeks after my son was born, I returned to Vance Corporation, not as the Director of Public Relations, but as the Executive Vice President, a title Alistair created to reflect my new, undisputed authority. My first act was to finalize the corporate restructuring I had suggested months earlier. Departments were streamlined, inefficiencies cut, and my uncle's cronies, who had been a festering problem for years, were systematically and legally removed. The company, for so long a sluggish giant, began to show signs of agile life. I knew my uncle would retaliate. He had been biding his time, waiting for a moment of weakness. He found it, or so he thought, in a vulnerable supplier that was critical to one of our older product lines, a company he secretly controlled. He declared a sudden 30% price increase, betting that the disruption would cripple us and make the board question my leadership. But I was ready. I asked my father to convene an emergency board meeting. When my uncle, smug and condescending, began to lay out his unfortunate but necessary price hike, I stood and placed a single thick file on the polished mahogany table. "Gentlemen," I began, my voice calm and clear. "For years, Vance Corporation has been held hostage by this particular supply chain. What you are witnessing today is not a market fluctuation, but an attempted coup." I opened the file. It contained not only the patent for the revolutionary new component I had invested in years ago, but also the first production reports from the new wholly owned subsidiary I had quietly established. "This," I said, tapping the file, "renders that entire supply chain obsolete. It's more efficient, more profitable, and it belongs entirely to us. The era of being blackmailed by hidden adversaries is over." The room was silent. My uncle's face was a thundercloud of shock and fury. Alistair looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes that went beyond approval or satisfaction. I saw respect. He had battled this particular demon for decades, and I had slain it in a single stroke. The vote was unanimous. We severed ties with my uncle's company and activated the new supply line. The attempted coup had not only failed, it had cemented my power and exposed my uncle's treachery to the entire board. He was effectively neutered. In the aftermath, my father did something he had never done before. He came to my office alone. "Alara," he said, standing before my desk. "What you did today, it was masterful." He paused as if searching for words that did not come easily to him. "Your son, my grandson, he is lucky to have you as his mother. This company is lucky to have you." It wasn't an expression of love. It was something perhaps more valuable in the world we inhabited. A total and complete acknowledgement of my worth. The throne of the Vance Empire once meant for Julian was now mine. And I had built it not just of gold but of unbreakable glass. Transparent, formidable, and entirely my own. The years that followed the boardroom coup were a testament to relentless growth. With the shackles of my uncle's influence broken and the innovative new product line fueling our expansion, Vance Corporation's revenue broke record after record. I was no longer just Alistair Vance's daughter. I was Alara Vance, the architect of the company's renaissance. My son, Alistair Jr., we called him AJ, became the center of my world. He was a bright, curious child, and I was determined that his upbringing would be nothing like mine. He was taught the value of the Vance name, yes, but he was also encouraged to have his own passions, his own voice. I would often find him in my father's study, the two of them with their heads bent over a model ship or a complex puzzle, a faint smile on the old man's face that I had rarely seen in my youth. In AJ, Alistair had found a purity of purpose he had never known with Julian. Eleanor doted on her grandson, but her true partnership was with me. Together we became an unstoppable force in both business and society. She handled the delicate, intricate web of social connections, the charity galas and the political fundraisers, while I commanded the boardroom. The Vance name, once associated with cold calculation and private scandal, was now synonymous with innovation, stability, and formidable strength. When AJ turned 10, I made a decision that shocked the corporate world. I established the Vance Foundation, a philanthropic arm dedicated to funding education and healthcare for underprivileged children. It was a project of the heart, a quiet rebellion against the purely transactional nature of my own beginnings. At the foundation's inaugural gala, I stood at the podium, AJ holding my hand beside me. "We are defined not only by what we build for ourselves," I told the glittering audience, "but by what we build for others. Legacy is not a vault to be guarded, but a garden to be tended." The speech was reprinted in major financial papers. It was good PR, of course, but it was also the truth. I was building a different kind of dynasty, one that could wield its power for more than just profit. It was around this time that a ghost from the past resurfaced, not as a threat but as an opportunity. Lysander Thorne, my old university flame and now a titan of global industry, was looking to form a deep strategic alliance that went far beyond a simple supply contract. He wanted to merge certain future-facing divisions of Ethelred Group with Vance Corporation to create a new entity, a joint venture that would dominate the next generation of technology. He flew in to discuss the proposal personally. We met in my office, the city sprawled out behind me like a map of my domain. He was older, more polished, but the same sharp intelligence glittered in his eyes. "Alara," he said, taking a seat. "You've built something remarkable here. It's everything I knew you were capable of." "Thank you, Lysander. The feeling is mutual. Ethelred's growth has been impressive." We spent an hour discussing the hard numbers, the market synergies, the potential pitfalls. It was a dance of two equals, a meeting of minds that was as intellectually stimulating as it was professionally rewarding. As the meeting drew to a close, he leaned back, a more personal note entering his voice. "I have to admit, when you called me all those years ago to salvage that first deal, I never imagined this. I thought you were just fighting to survive." "I was," I replied honestly. "And now?" he asked, his gaze intent. "Now," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face, "I'm playing a different game entirely." The joint venture was a resounding success, solidifying our companies as inseparable partners on the world stage. It was also the final definitive proof that I had transcended the shadow of my father and my husband. I was not merely the custodian of the Vance legacy, I was its primary author. On the day the venture was officially launched, my father presented me with a gift. It was a simple, elegant fountain pen, crafted from a rare, dark wood. "This was my father's," he said, his voice gruff. He used it to sign the documents that founded this company. I always thought I would give it to Julian. He met my eyes. I was wrong. It was always meant for you. I took the pen. It was heavy, imbued with the weight of history. But in my hand it did not feel like a burden. It felt like a tool. I had spent my life following scripts written by others. Now I would write my own. 15 years flowed into the next with the steady, powerful current of a well-managed river. Vance Corporation, under my leadership, became a global behemoth, consistently ranked among the world's most admired and profitable companies. The narrative of the betrayed wife who saved the empire had long since faded, replaced by my reputation as a visionary CEO, ruthless when necessary, brilliant in strategy, and fiercely protective of my company and my family. AJ grew into a fine young man, intelligent and kind, with none of the entitlement that had rotted his father's soul. He chose to study engineering and business at university, not out of duty, but out of a genuine fascination for how things worked and how they could be made better. The summer he turned 21, he came to work at the company, not as a vice president, but as a junior analyst. He wanted to learn from the ground up to earn his place. My heart swelled with a pride so profound it was almost painful. The day he graduated with honors, I felt a chapter of my life click firmly, satisfyingly into place. The future of the Vance empire was secure, and it was in capable, worthy hands. That night, alone in my bedroom, I went to the walk-in wardrobe and moved aside a panel in the back, revealing a small, hidden safe. Inside there were no jewels or stacks of cash. There was only a single old leather-bound notebook. I carried it to my desk and sat, the quiet of the mansion settling around me. I opened it. The pages were yellowed, the ink slightly faded. It was a record of my first life. The fears, the quiet desperation, the detailed accounts of Julian's betrayals, and the cold, clinical notes about my death. It was a chronicle of the woman I used to be. On the final blank page, I picked up my grandfather's fountain pen. The dark wood was smooth and warm from years of use. I paused, the silence stretching, filled with the echoes of 2 lifetimes. Then I began to write. I did not write of corporate victories or financial figures. I wrote a letter to a ghost, to the version of me who never got a second chance. This is the second time I've been given the chance to live again. I built an empire. I protected our son. I found a strength I never knew I possessed. I learned that legacy is not about bloodline, but about the will to shape your own destiny. I stopped, thinking of the rain-slicked highway, of the cold, of the betrayal. I thought of the scared woman at the gala, and the defiant one who poured the wine. The cage is gone, I wrote, the pen scratching softly in the quiet room. I melted it down and forged it into a key. If there is ever a third life, I do not know what it will hold. But I hope you find your key. I hope you will do better than me. I hope you will be free. I closed the notebook. The past was finally, completely laid to rest. There were no more ghosts in the hallway, no more echoes of tires on wet asphalt. There was only the present, a kingdom of my own making and a future I had built with my own 2 hands. I stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city lights that glittered like a field of captured stars. Every one of them represented a life, a story, a struggle. Mine had been a story of betrayal, revenge, and reclamation. But it had ended not with a victory lap, but with a quiet, hard-won peace. The second chance had not been about undoing the past. It had been about seizing the future. And I had. The end.